Today, we're going to hear from our own member, Desiree Scherini. She's recognized as a top hypnotherapist in Washington, D.C. By 3 best rated and top docs, and was awarded Outstanding Transpersonal Contribution as a hypnotherapist from the National Association of Transpersonal Hypnotherapists in 2018. She has a degree in psychology and a higher diploma in theosophy from the Theosophical Society in England. She's a board certified clinical transpersonal hypnotherapist in practice since 2012. And other specialty certifications include neurolinguistic programming, past life hypnosis, life between life spiritual regression, Reiki master, Leishan healing, certified medium, and dowser, and other modalities for client success. She's the author of Journey to Joy, The Written Path, and hosts the podcast and YouTube show Intuitive Journey with Desiree. Desiree is also an artist and an arts instructor. She has a passion for learning and sharing what she has learned with others. And as most of you know, she's a member of the DC Lodge. Welcome to Desiree. It's all yours, Desiree.
Thank you, Suzanne. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. My talk is on human consciousness after death, and I'm going to have it in like 3 parts here. The first part is me fuddling about, so it's 4 parts. The other 3 parts are, I'm going to kind of divide it into sort of an argument for maybe the non-theosophist or even the doubting theosophist about consciousness and the reality of consciousness and the unseen. Just in general. Then I'm going to share my personal experience because this is part of what got me interested. And and then I'm going to move further into what Theosophy says about the spiritual being and the levels that we pass through after death. So what led me here? Curiosity, my personal experiences, and my profession. And as Suzanne introduced me, I am a hypnotherapist. I do past life regressions and life between life spiritual regression, which is it's not that well known. It's as opposed to going past life, it takes the client into that space of time between lives, just like it says. So into the spirit world. I've had contact with the Disembodied as, who is it? What's his name? Where'd he go? There is Ledbetter. Instead of saying dead or alive, one of the terms he would use is embodied or disembodied, because the spirit is always there. And just curiosity born of a knowing that there's more than meets the eye. And of course, that's part of what led me to Theosophy. So I'm going to start with, I've just pulled out of the Merriam-Webster dictionary, the definition of consciousness. And there are several options here. The one I've chosen to use as my basis for consciousness is that it's the state of being characterized by sensation, emotion, volition, and thought, mind, that we can probably pretty much agree upon here. And it's that part of us that thinks, feels, has emotion, has intention, and self-awareness. So beginning with the idea of universal consciousness. Look, I have to move this so I can see my own slide. Okay, so many sources point to a universally shared consciousness, referred to in many ways as the Akashic records, the collective unconscious, and maybe Suzanne will tell me if I'm saying this wrong, but Gestalt intelligence, universal intelligence, hive mind, and other descriptors that all pertain to an interconnection between beings and all that is. From the Secret Doctrine, the quote, everything in the universe through all its kingdoms is conscious, such as endowed with a consciousness of its own kind and on its own plane of perception. There is no such thing as either dead or blind matter, as there is no blind or unconscious law. clicking. There it goes. So going from a universal consciousness to what we experience as our individual consciousness, that sort of experience of separateness. And the simplest approach would be Rene Descartes, his quote, "I think, therefore I am." It recognizes the true simplicity of existence, that our consciousness is, at the very least, real to ourselves. Consciousness is now revealed as being present anywhere and everywhere in the universe. Our own consciousness is simply one particular and not necessarily privileged form of it. Quote from Richard Smalley. So actually going back to the individual consciousness and the universal consciousness. So, one of the things that got tabooed was the term the ether. In our universe, scientists seem to only be able to account for something like, I think, 30% or so, maybe less than that, of matter. There's the dark matter, dark energy. There's something that just can't narrow down. So there's something going on there as everything is conscious. Some examples of a shared consciousness that I came up with, besides the fact that there is, extrasensory perception, simultaneous inventions, and aha moments. Okay, so when considering the phenomena of shared knowledge and experience without direct contact, it can lead to the concept that our individual consciousness is simply a part of a single consciousness, metaphorically a drop in the ocean, and our consciousness is a part of the whole, individual yet incorporated. Some examples. Electromagnetic phenomena was discovered by Michael Faraday in England in 1831, and independently about the same time by Joseph Henry in the US, and the jet engine independently invented by Hans von Ohain in 1939, Secondo Campini in 1941, and Frank Whittle also in 1941. So just a couple of examples of the what we would call download, or some sort of universal aha moments that more than one person have had at a time. And in the same vein, when you know who's going to be calling and you pick up the phone, or you and your friend both say the same thing at the same time, or wear the same clothes, that's something I always notice is there's a universal color code that seems to go on. So the question, I would say, about consciousness before or after death is consciousness, precedes all things, including our individual existence. And actually, this was just commented on in the members meeting. So perhaps the question for the people out there that, don't believe in, life after death is that perhaps the question is not so much, does consciousness survive after death, but does consciousness exist before life? So individual energy beyond our physical bodies. And I continue with examples here about the reality, just what's real, what's the truth. Our minds and bodies are essentially electrical. Electrical impulses are what allows our nervous system to send signals throughout the body and to the brain. It animates our movements and our thoughts. Without it, we are essentially inert, in our bodies anyway. When the flow of electricity ceases permanently in a body, it's called death. If your heart's not beating and your brain's not sending out impulses here in our 3D reality, oh, you're dead. Okay. But, we're energetic beings and everything is energy. So when our body, our vehicle ceases to run, it goes away. So energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be changed from one form to another, according to Albert Einstein. So when something material is destroyed, it simply transforms. Wood burns, becomes fire, smoke, heat, and ash. When the human body dies, its atoms also transform. So what then becomes of our consciousness? I need to move this. Recent science supports unseen and unexplained phenomena, real realities, the persistence of energy beyond death. There's electromagnetic energy beyond the body, aura, images, the particles communicating beyond the confines of space and time. For example, entanglement, and they know what works, they know what happens, but they don't know how and why. These facts provide conditions that can support events that have been called supernatural, psychic, and unbelievable, including evidence of the survival of human consciousness after permanent bodily death. So, moving on to the spiritual experience of a disembodied consciousness. So the brain does not create or produce consciousness. Rather, it filters it. Consciousness actually exists independently and outside of the brain as an inherent property of the universe itself, like dark matter and dark energy or gravity. This from Dr. Peter Fenwick, a neuropsychiatrist, who had begun as cynic, and when he studied and the more he came to know, the more he adopted his belief system that yes, there is a consciousness that is not in the body. Keeping up with myself here. So next. So now I'm going to kind of just move into other people. There's a Dr. Brian Weiss, a respected psychiatrist, who did not believe in reincarnation until one of his clients spontaneously went into a past life experience while she was under hypnosis. And with his experiences, he ended up writing the book, Many Lives, Many Masters. And he confirmed elements of the patient's story through public records and became convinced that indeed she had some knowledge of past existences. And there are people that say, well, it wasn't her life, it was a group existence that she has memory of, or that being said, just to be able to confirm that someone in this lifetime has knowledge of something from some past lifetime, it just confirms that consciousness, either the consciousness soup that they can draw from, or their individual soul experiencing reincarnation and maintaining somewhere those memories. So also near-death experiences. So many have provided information, verifiable experiences of that life between lives, because they went there and came back. And as well, past life memories, either through people spontaneously, young children often remember their last life up until around the age of 5, and can talk about it. Interestingly, I discovered that and I found confirmation in a talk with Pablo, that most children who have past life memories, that when they can verify the person who they're remembering, it was most usually someone who died unexpectedly before their time. And so I won't be getting into that in this talk, but the concept of reincarnation, that sometimes a soul will reincarnate right away because they weren't actually done. So they get like to the head of the line instead of going through these many stages that most souls will progress through. So I thought that was pretty interesting. That was mentioned by Dr. Ian Stevenson just in passing that it seems like most of the past life memories of these children were of a sudden death. And I also, I guess the Mahatma letters refers to something of the same kind, of that quicker reincarnation. Another experiential evidence, spiritual exploration through meditation or hypnosis, as well as psychic and medium communication with the disembodied and astral travel. So now I'll get into the second part. Now that I kind of set the stage, get into the second part where I'm just going to share my personal experiences, because this is a big part of what had me even more curious about this. So as a hypnotherapist, doing the life between lives and past life regressions, I've also had my own. I'm not going to go into my past life experiences so much because the focus of the talk is more about the spiritual existence beyond the physical body and the current lifetime, which would be that spiritual world, which would be the, Kamaloka, the Devashon, the astral plane. So I'm just going to share my story here. In a life between lives regression, which the process takes quite a long time, actually, it can go 3 to 6 hours. And it's a very deep, long induction. And while you are under hypnosis, you are also communicating with the facilitator, the hypnotist. And I won't go through all the details, but my experience was going through sort of like floating in the dark for quite a while. And I have to back up a little bit here because I had studied, I as part of being certified in the process, I had to read several books on it. And Dr. Michael Newton was the one who, with Alan Chips, created this life between lives regression process. And he wrote books, Journey of Souls, and where's I? Not in my brain right now, but a couple books on this process and the experiences that he had. Hundreds of clients that he took through this, and there seemed to be, regardless, these people didn't know each other. They had no reason to have had, shared stories, but there seemed to be a progression, and these different stages, or almost like different rooms and parts that they go through in that world of the spiritual world. So it's almost like being able to visit your world before coming into this life is basically where it takes you, and provide some understanding and some maybe even relief from suffering about why is my life like this. So it's a chance to ask some of those questions and see, what the plan was before you came. Anyway, so I actually had some sort of expectation about what was coming, and because I'd read the books, and I'd read other people's experiences. So when I had my own experience, it almost kind of lended validity to the process because it wasn't just like I expected it to be. So at first I was just sort of in the dark and I was expecting to go someplace. But I was just kind of in the dark, and my facilitator said, well, look for a light, and I'm just in my space, and I look around and okay, I think I see a light, that go toward the light, sort of like the light at the end of the tunnel. And so I progressed through there, sort of like a tunnel of light and shapes and colors changing, and finally get to sort of like a cave-like, but it was light-filled space full of these orbs, different kinds of amorphous colored orbs. And as it says here, I began to recognize them as friends and family, despite their appearance being only colored energetic orbs of light. And the surprising thing, though, was as I looked around and started recognizing people, I said, wait a minute, this is strange, because all these people are still alive. Nobody in that room of orbs was someone who had passed on. And I'm thinking, what are they doing in the spirit world? Like, why are they here? And later on, I got some confirmation that, I had heard that sometimes part of your spirit comes down into this space. And later on, I'll explain, visit with my mother, who explained this too. And then later, I also read in 100-Year-Old Book by Ledbetter, yes, part of you is always in that spirit world. Okay, so I was surprised, but then I moved into a next sort of room, and there were more amorphous colored lights, and all of those lights I recognized as beings who had passed on. And recognizing my godparents and my mother, and there was a sense of true emotion, just like you get in a past life regression, that separates it from a dream, unless it's a very intense dream sometimes. But you have a sense of reality and the emotion and connection that is really very hard to describe, like, unless you've been there. So as I moved forward, I went on to, as I was moving, there was a large white light that seemed to accompany me, always off to the side. And while I was there with, my passed on loved ones, I didn't want to move on from that space, but eventually passed through a tunnel-like corridor where there were geometric shapes, and they just kind of started to grow. And as I went through, these shapes began to take forms that seemed like buildings, but they weren't quite solid. And I just sort of seemed to float through this space, as if there was a learning experience going on there. And this fits with so many descriptions found in different places, that this transition goes from being greeted by your soul family, going through some learning and education, and then finally ending. And not everybody takes the same steps, apparently. But then I ended up sort of like in a review, and I could ask my facilitator, I'd like an answer for why I have a relationship with this person or that person, and what do I need to learn in this lifetime? Why am I here? Sort of a review and an understanding, and then being brought back out. So that was my experience in that life between lives, the spiritual realm. Another personal experience I had in particular was communication from my mother. And this moves into then that, consciousness beyond life, and my direct experience of having that. So before my mom died, I started getting information about people. I was talking to a man that I know, and the name Gertrude just kept coming into my head while I was looking at him, and Gertrude. And I'm like, okay. And I said, yeah. And I said, do you know somebody named Gertrude? Of all names, right? And he said, well, why? That's, my aunt. I was very close to her. And I said, oh, to me, this was probably the first time that this had come through to me. And I said, well, okay, I'm just getting that name in my head. Maybe she just wants to say hello. So I had a few experiences like that, of knowledge that I shouldn't have or wouldn't normally have, like the little veil was lifting or something. So the day after my mother's death, and I was there in the home with her for a week before she died, and that day, and I was still in the home. The day after she passed on, I was just waking up, and for those of you who are familiar with, meditation, hypnosis, and or communication, it's that half awake, half asleep state that kind of opens up, gets rid of the conscious, door, opens up that door, and you're more open to communication or knowledge. And so I was just waking up, but my eyes were still closed. And in my vision of closed eyes, she was standing beside my bed and was bending over and waving her arm up like this with these three flat, smooth stones in front of her, like, like they were cement or marble, and one was smaller and the next one behind it was bigger and taller, and the next one was behind it was bigger and taller, like up to her chest. And she was waving her hand upward in front of her, like that. And she didn't speak, but I heard her in my mind's ear saying, "Build me up," and then something about her bed. Okay, and so that's what I got from it. And I shared this story with my my dad and my sister, and I, I'm like, I don't know what that means. Well, a couple days later, we were at the cemetery choosing someplace, and the attendant said, he was showing us a map, and he says, well, we have a space over here, we have this space over there, or if you're interested, we have the new mausoleum. And he pushed the picture in front of us, and the new mausoleum was this smooth, square, tall, 8-level tall, smooth, flat stone structure. And we all looked at each other, and my dad said, well, your mother never liked the idea of being buried. So we're like, okay, I got the message. We knew she, and so the interesting thing is this is directly after her death. And when we go forward into talking about that when someone first dies, according to Theosophy and other belief systems, that they're still on that astral plane. So this is her personality that's still hanging around and has some unfinished business. And she, wanted me to know she didn't want to get buried. She wanted to be up in the mausoleum. So she did get a top floor corner unit there. And so, a little gratitude that I was able to hear her and follow through with these final wishes. So I had several dreams of her, and after about maybe a couple, 2-3 months, my dad grieving, of course, and I would visit him often, and I was with him. And my dad said, I really miss your mother. I never dream of her. I wish I could have dreams of her, because I was often sharing the dreams. And so I thought, well, she talked to me once before. I'll ask her if she has anything for my dad. So the next morning, as I was just waking, again in that half awake, half asleep state, I said, hey, Mom, you got anything you want me to share with Dad? And I got the message to look in the wooden box for a note or card, something in the right-hand corner, and pink flowers, a card or piece of paper. And I'm sharing here what we ended up finding. See, their house had burnt down in 2018. And I thought, where in the world would a wooden box with any paper be, right? And I told my dad what she said, that she had, this is when I asked for something for him, this is what she had. And I'm like, well, that's odd. And I said, is there any wooden box that would have paper? And he says, well, they had a storage space, like a small house behind their house that wasn't touched by the fire. And there's a wooden chest there that just had old family photos and mementos and that sort of thing. So we went out there, and I focused on the right-hand corner, digging down into that, and I found this letter. And now this letter was one that was sent to my dad in 1976 while he was on a trip, while he was on a business trip in Pensacola, which is where my parents had met. And And as you can see, it says Howard Johnson's Lodge, please deliver to Captain Holmes. On the other side, it was returned to sender because he had already left and maybe never got the letter. When we found it, it was sealed. Now, I don't know if it was sealed from age or if he never received it. When I read it to him, he said, and showed it to him, he said he never remembered ever getting it. And it was certainly interesting that a letter from 1976 would just still be stored in this wooden box with, old stuff. So I'm just going to share the beginning of the letter. Hang on, I'm going to share what she had to say. Well, the beginning of the letter, the first part, she's just talking about her day and, she did this, she did that. However, the first line of the letter, ironically, is, my dearest Bob, I feel just wonderful to get your letter. It was like being in heaven. There's a few hints thrown in here. And she just talks about missing him. But on the last page, she says, I love you so very much. I think of you much. How could I show you? My feelings are so enormous. You away from me in Pensacola brings back such nice memories. I wish I was there with you to go up to our little peaceful bridge and just love. Then she goes on to remember the time I got mad at you there because you used to wear that other girl's ring and you took it off and threw it down. I picked it up and gave it back to you, and you told me that I was the only one you wanted and loved. Remember our lake? Wasn't that fun? Let's go again. See you soon. With love and kisses, yours alone forever, Dolly. She also had said, if I was there, I would kiss you and hug you all over. And as you might imagine, if there weren't a better message to send from the other side of the grave, to be so clear and concise, to share this, I think there's no question here for me anyway, that was indeed a message from beyond and communication. So especially that I didn't know the letter was there. My dad didn't know the letter was there. And so clearly my mom knew it was there and wanted him to have it. So after I got that message, however, while it was still the initial message, while I was still there, I felt like I really had a strong connection with her. And I asked her, I said, so Mom, while you're there, while I got you, what's it like? And she said, it's soft, it's beautiful. I'm beautiful, everything is beautiful. And I asked if my recently deceased godparents were there, and she said, yes, they're here. And then I asked if my sister who had passed in 2014 was there, and she replied, yes, your sister is here, and Donnie's here. And Donnie was a beloved dog she'd had many years even before I was born. And then she said, everybody's here. You're here too. You just don't know it. And the thing was, this was in July, before I read the Michael Newton books and before I'd had my own experience and before I read Ledbetter's book, where after she said this is the first person I heard it from. So I was like, what do you mean I'm there too? And I just don't know it. Then I got confirmation from these other sources that indeed my soul is still there. I just don't know it because from this 3D reality, I have the veil in front of me, and only through, say, meditation, hypnosis, or certain breakthrough aha moments do I recognize that I'm there too. Now, a quote from HPB: the Devashonic lives its intermediate cycle between two incarnations, surrounded by everything it had aspired to in vain and in the companionship of everyone it loved on earth. It has reached the fulfillment of all its soul yearnings, and thus it lives throughout long centuries an existence of unalloyed happiness, which is the reward for its suffering in earth life. And I thought that was a perfect parallel for her description, and it fits the teachings Okay, this is a wonderfully, you can find it on the Theosophy site, this wonderful image as I move into what level are we on? And this goes into everything. However, over on the lower right-hand side is where we're looking at the dense physical body, the etheric physical, the astral part of that, the mental, the Buddhic, and Atmic. But I just love this image because it has everything else in there too. So what level was I talking to my mom on, right? I mentioned that with her, I was talking, she was likely still on the astral plane with that first communication, right? She was still tied to her worldly matter. Now, the second communication was 3 months later, and it certainly sounds like she had stepped into the Devashonic world, the Devashani, that she had, we had passed that intermediate level, the in which we have here. Well, here's just a comparison of the 7 levels of the human being, just to kind of look at that. The physical body, the Strula Sharira, here we are. That's like our shell here, like our physical shell. The astral body is, also, and certainly, as many of you would know, some of these kind of slip in and out of each other or have different names. The etheric double astral body, prana, life force, the lower mind, the desire body, the higher mind, manas, compassion, empathy, the soul, the spiritual soul, the vehicle, pure universal spirit, God consciousness, also Buddhi, and source, the highest and most subtle, Brahman, the absolute. Now, I laid these down next to this kind of a diagram where it puts them together, the higher triad, the lower manas and personality, and the lower. So here you can kind of see these 3 separations. Where you have the physical body, the astral body, and prana that are part of our existence on this plane. Then you can move into the manas, the kama manas or manas, and to me, I'm seeing these levels as somewhat coexisting with the levels of the spiritual world. So they all coexist at the same time, as does the energies of the spiritual world. And of course, in that place, sometimes they talk about how long you spend one time and how long you spend another place. But those are all human things. They're beyond here. Once we certainly get up to the higher triad, there's no time and space. There's just everything at once, as I understand it. So the reason I'm bringing this up is that my mom's communication with me that day after, I believe, was from the astral body. And then you go into this gestation state. So, and I think she had passed that gestation state somehow to communicate from the lower level of the Devashonic plane, where that spiritual connection can happen. Soul being a generic term, there are in men 3 aspects, and this is from Theosophy Wiki, 3 aspects of soul: the terrestrial or animal, the human soul, and the spiritual soul. I won't go ahead through reading all that. Immortal, consciously divine, assimilated in the higher manas. The levels of heaven, and this is from Master K.H. in one of the letters. He described them as the period between death and rebirth may last from a few years to a kalpa. A kalpa is like a day of Brahman. I don't know if it goes into that here. It is divided into 3 sub-periods. 1, when the ego delivered of its mortal coil enters into Kamaloka. 2, when it enters into its gestation state. 3 when it is reborn in Rupa Loka or Devashan. And the subperiod may last from a few minutes to a number of years. The phrase "a few years" becoming puzzling and utterly worthless without a more complete explanation. Subperiod is very long, longer sometimes than you may even imagine, yet proportionate to the ego's spiritual subperiod. And 3 lasts in proportion. And of course, I have a bar in my way, so I can't read that. And I can make this bar disappear, I would. But also, I thought this was useful. Check my time here, see how I'm doing. Okay, so this also, I thought, did a good job of dividing it into the 3. Now, every level seems to have 7 more levels, and every 7 more levels has 7 more levels. We could go on. So I'm trying to keep this somewhat simple. So they have group 1 and spirit kind of coinciding here. The spiritual monad individually in its vehicle, eternal and indestructible, Atma and Buddhi, pure spirit, spiritual soul, or intelligence. And that would be beyond, as I understand it, beyond the Devashonic plane. That would be moving to the higher levels of that space and maybe into nirvana. Group B, the manas, kamarupa, and the soul, astral monad, personal ego, and its vehicle, they survive the group 3, and it's destroyed after a time unless reincarnated, as said, under exceptional circumstances. So this is the reincarnating soul, as well as the spirit. So, you know, like if we look at as this as a rainbow instead of separate pieces, you can imagine that in that group B, that they're still not too far away energetically from communicating with someone who's still in the physical body who can dial in. So sometimes our vibration, our frequency is high or low, and the disembodied soul on its own volition could move within a certain level and come lower, while the embodied spirit can reach higher in certain circumstances. And that's how I believe that this communication can happen, that that there's not a closed door. So when can spirit communicate? There are some statements that open the possibility of consciousness before Devashan. So a spirit or the spiritual ego cannot descend to the medium. So that's what I was just saying. It can't come down into our 3D reality without the medium or the, you know, the embodied spirit ascending to a degree, but it can attract the spirit of the latter to itself. And it can do this only during 2 intervals, before and after its gestation period. And this is why I was saying she must have been communicating after that later period where she described Devashan at one of that earlier stages of Devashan. Interval the first is that period between the physical death and the merging of the spiritual ego into that state, which is known as the Arat esoteric doctrine as Bardo. We have translated this to the gestation period, and it lasts from a few days to several years, according to the evidence of the adepts. Interval the second lasts so long as the merits of the old ego entitle the being to reap the fruit of its reward in its new regenerated egoship. It occurs after the gestation period is over and the new spiritual ego is reborn, like the fabled phoenix from its ashes. From the old one, the locality which the former inhabited is called the Northern Buddhist occultist. And again, if I could make this bar disappear, I would, but I believe you can all see the end of that. And finally, the physical body is only one level of the intricate composition of the human being. And that is the end of my sharing and explaining what I believe is going on when we communicate, how I think that we can communicate, how we can view that world through meditation, hypnosis, or simply, aha moments, how the spirit can reach down to us and we can reach up to them in the appropriate circumstances. Sometimes reference has been made to that it's not right to call upon spirit because they're busy doing their own thing. However, as in my mother's case, right after she died, she came to me, she had something to say. I also believe that spirit will not bother with connecting if they are not wanting to share something with the person who is asking. And usually, so there are certainly stories of mediumship where they're like, I'm not getting anything, nobody's coming. And they're not going to come if they don't have something to share. However, if they do have something to share on their own volition, they can choose to come down and share something. So that sort of communication and mediumship is what I think I'm referring to. Is it's not a pull, but rather an openness to receive. All right, and that is the end. So thank you. And now any questions and conversations, I would be happy to, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. One second, Alma. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation and also sharing your personal experience. And before, and you can stop the share if you.
All right, thank you.
If you want to. Before Alma starts his question, I just wanted to refer to the chat. Stephen said during the talk, an intriguing connection here with the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And then Carol Lee said how exciting. I too was certified by Michael Newton and Linda Beckman. The most profound experience in all of my life in Theosophy and other modalities for over 60 years. And just in case you're new, if you want to ask a question, you can raise your hand or unmute yourself. The first one is Alma, and then Carol Lee is the next one. Go ahead, Alma.
Oh, yeah. I have a question about the gestation period. Is there any texts or any knowledge about, is there sort of like a relationship between the people who were left on Earth and they had a connection with this person, and in terms of, is this sort of like you said, it can be varying the times of when the that person or spirit moves on to different level, and is there sort of a connection between the people used to have a connection with this person and they to some degree holding them back or other? And that's the second part of the question is why do some cultures have different approach to the mourning in terms of I've heard some one culture, can't recall which one, says like you should never mention the dead, that person, never mention them. So there's a different approach to that. And is there any knowledge about that? And the third thing about that related thing is I've heard in Australia certain the Aboriginal or is it some other cultures there, Islander cultures or something, where they say like whenever they have some news on the television about this, what happened about these people, they always have these warning signs, in terms of, these people don't want to be depicted or I don't know. There's some, there's some different strategies about how do you deal with the dead, and do you know anything about that? Why people? Sorry.
Yeah, to some degree. So I think from studying for this, the theosophical side of it. The little bit I picked up could like lead to a whole nother talk about these different stages. So, that'll maybe be coming next fall. So from what I picked up from Theosophy's idea is that in the gestation period, so you have the 3 stages. Right after you die, you're kind of still on that astral plane or Kamaloka. Also, I believe from the gestation, well, I'll get there. Then there's the gestation period. And according to the literature, theosophical literature, you're not in communication. You are like, you're like getting a mind wipe almost. It's like you're asleep. And they talk about it as Bardo, that you're just, your spirit is not, you're just not, you're downtime. Like almost like deep sleep for a human, except for the dreamless sleep. And then they move on to Devashon, where they get to kind of wake back up, all refreshed. So whatever's happened during the gestation, say it's almost like a fetus. You're dumping off the old, you're getting cleaned up, and you move into Devashon. But different levels of Devashon, I believe, you still can bring your old earthly ego to because they can still communicate again. So according to Blavatsky, you can communicate right after you're dead, and then once you reach Devashon. But during the gestation period, there's nothing. And of course, for us, since we have this idea of time and space, what does that mean here? So that's what I picked up from that. I thought was interesting. As far as people saying don't speak of the dead, while studying, so after I got these spontaneous sort of psychic or mediumship stuff, I've studied with several psychic mediums, and just to say, well, how should I handle this? What should I learn? How, and the talk about you don't want to pull somebody back here. And so they do say that sometimes if people are grieving too badly and, oh, mom, I wish you were here, that the personality of the person that's still passed on does feel a responsibility in a way to hover, to hang around, because they're still in that, the human mind still, they're still tied. So that could be one reason they say don't speak of the dead, just let them go and never mention them again. And also you've probably all heard of the idea when somebody says, oh, let them go, or like you feel like the spirit's hanging around, and someone will say, it's okay, you can go, we're all right, and release them to take their journey. So there does seem to be from the spirit an emotional attachment. Did that answer your question?
Okay. Yeah, he's nodding his head. The next one is Carolyn, and then I'm going to read Greg's question, who posted his question.
Okay, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
You hear me? Yes. Okay. This experience, these experiences were profound, beyond profound. I had some of the experiences Suzanne had, but different ones. I also saw my soul group in lights and color.
Yeah.
I did not connect with anyone who had passed over. I just simply went straight to the council. There was a council, and there were 9 people on this council, and they came up. That was like they were coming up out of the earth. And I was in this massive building, and you expect the glory of this. You expect that they're going to give you direction. Okay, somebody's going to tell me what to do, or what's the next step, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and one of them was a woman, and she genuinely kind of bowed to me, and I'm thinking, why is she doing that? And they all had on white garments with the pyramid going up, not down. It's not like evolution, not involution. and that were amethyst. And there was one man who looked older. And so I asked, who are you? And because I'm saying, I don't know, I was just enamored of this whole thing. And he said Elohim, which is like God, I guess, a group of gods. And so the only thing I got from that was they all said, job well done.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there was no making you feel bad about anything, or you aren't getting it right or anything. It was just an affirmation of the path that I was on. And it was profound.
Isn't it wonderful? Yeah.
So that was one of them. Then another, my guide, Saruk, who met me, I finally said to him the second, I said, you know, you look like my son. And my son has passed over.
Oh.
And he said, he took me to records and he said, I have been your son. This time I am your teacher. So it was profound.
It's
And
fascinating, isn't it?
it's the most valid. It doesn't leave you. It's so real and it's so powerful that you can't even believe. You would never doubt that this is a beneficent universe, because everything is so geared to evolution and the evolving spirit, and you just feel like one with it all. So anybody who get a chance to do this, I recommend you do this. I tried to have a final one I wanted, because I'm 80, I'll be 84. And I wanted to have another one with Linda Bachman from Denver. But after the pandemic, she's not traveling anymore. So I won't have another one. She's just profound. So that's it. And I never tried to link it with Theosophy. It was just so, it spoke to everything that Theosophy says to me. And Linda Bachman is a Theosophist. So it just was profound. That's all I can tell you guys.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
You know, I have to say, what's it, and she said, you know, they said, job well done. Well, I had a client, you know, with Life Between Lives, and when he got to this space where there were these, you know, what would be the council, and he says, I want to stay. I don't want to go back. Can't I stay? Can't I be done? And they said, no, you have a lot of work to do. So not everybody gets the job well done check mark. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing these stories, both. So let me just read what Greg said. He said, how does the way in which Charles Leadbeater and HPB have described the Devashonic Plane and the between life experience help you better understand what emerges during your work with clients in transpersonal hypnotherapy?
Well, you know, these quotes that I shared from HPB were new to me while I was doing the research for this. And I had read, I did a presentation like a year or two ago on the Devashonic Plane, or I forgot, but something like past life. And so I got that little old 100-year-old book called The Devashonic Plane. And it was fascinating to find, like I said, the parallels between, because he did a psychic meditation on his own to this life between lives state, to this spiritual realm. And his description was very much like the description of Michael Newton's clients, you know, hundreds of them. Like I said, there's these different stages, different groups, the soul group and the whole thing. His description was just like that. And then, of course, after my own experience, and like Carol Lee shared here, that it seems, you know, it's like, wow, well, we're all describing basically the same thing. So it must be real. It's not like we're imagining this. So it just provided more confirmation. and I really love having that they're spread apart by 100 years, and then also the confirmation from my mom, who is a direct, so I've been there, and then she tells me about it, and he talks about it, and HPB talks about it, and the Master KH talks about it. And I'm like, sounds like it's not made up.
Suzanne, wouldn't you agree that there's nothing like the experience of it?
I mean, I assume I'm Susanna, but I assume you mean Desiree. Desiree is the speaker.
Right,
today.
Desiree. Okay.
Desiree, yes.
Desiree, yes.
Yeah, just like I say, with the past life regression, people will, if they haven't done it before, they'll say, "Oh, it's like having a dream." I'm like, no, you're even though the images and stuff may be fuzzy or whatever, or difficult to see, it's like being there. It's like feeling there. So you have the emotion and also the spiritual. It's like I see it in my, like I'm describing it, I see it. It's like it's a memory. It's not, it's very real and also profound too. And of course, I got to see my mom, who was an orange and yellow, the blob of light. and she came over and like kind of embraced me. It was like this energy embrace, and it was like, I will share here actually a similar feeling I got when my godmother passed. I happened to be visiting Arizona, and I was driving, and I just got this rush of like energy through my chest. It was, it was almost like that movie Ghost, where, Whoopi Goldberg gets taken, and there was like this big energy that just came through me, and I just started crying, and I knew it was my godmother, and I was like, oh, and I contacted my god sister a little while later, and I said, knowing when you just know that my godmother had come through to say goodbye, and I didn't want to like say, did she just die? So I said, hey, I'm really feeling Anne, your mom, Anne, today. And she says, oh, that's because she just died a couple of hours ago, so the consciousness, the energy, it's there.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for the talk. Albert has a question. Desiree,
Thank you, Albert.
as always, you're fantastic. Yes, absolutely. And if nobody else unmutes, I will finish the program for today. I will send out the recording as always. And I hope you can join us next week when our Rosie, also a member of the DC Lodge, is going to talk about the first object and gender identity, a very different subject. And with that, all the best for the weekend, and I hope to see you next week. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Suzanne. Great.
Thank you.